Hello, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about cell fracture. We're going to get to a point where we can apply force to our cell fracture so that there's some kind of animation when the egg hatches. I'm going to change the viewport shading first, and then I'm going to rename my egg. So right now it's called icosphere, and we're going to rename this so it says whole egg. Before I apply the cell fracture, I'm going to make sure I have it enabled. So if you go to Edit, and then Preferences, we're going to go under Get Extensions and search for Cell or Cell Fracture, and you're going to see it here. We want to make sure we have it installed, and then we're going to go to Add-ons and make sure that we have it enabled. So I see that checkbox, that means that I have Cell Fracture enabled. Next thing, I'm going to select my egg, go to Object, and then go to Quick Effects. Under Quick Effects, I see Cell Fracture, and this is what I want to apply. The only thing that I change here is under Source Limit. It starts off at 100 usually, and I'm going to change this to something smaller so that I get fewer fractures. I think it looks the best and behaves the best. So I'll change it to something like 40. And then I hit OK, and it produces all of my fragments. I get 40 little egg fragments here. I'm going to move this to its own collection. It doesn't really make a difference in the scene we're going to produce, but it does help me turn the entire collection of fragments on and off easier. So I created a new collection, and I'm going to move all of these fragments under that collection. So now if I tap that little eye, I can turn on and off the fragments. I could do the same thing with the whole egg too. Hello, it's me from the future. I was looking at Xcode, I think we can get rid of some of the complexity that we have here. So we're scaling the egg in Xcode when we can do the same thing in Blender. So let's open up Blender. Once Blender's loaded up, let's make sure we have everything selected by pressing the A key. Then if you hit the S key, that allows you to scale. Once you hit the S key, you should see something like you see here. And then you can move the mouse until you get a scale that you're happy with. I clicked the X button so that I'm looking at the egg head on, and then pressing the G key you can grab it. But this makes it so that the egg can move anywhere, and if you hit the Z key, it'll lock it to the Z axis, and then we can move it to the origin. You can click when you're happy, and that gets rid of some code that you had to do in Xcode before. We're going to export just like we did before. We're going to go to File, Export, and then USD. And once you get there, you just want to rename the file. I renamed it to egg fracture, and then change the file extension from USDC to USDZ. And then you can export. Now that you have your file exported, we're going to export to SceneKit. So from the USDZ file, we want to hit this export to SceneKit file, and then it can just keep the same name and tap save, and you should have your scene file. Back in Xcode, this is where we want to drag and drop that scene file. Right now our scene file is the egg model one, and that's the old version of it. And so let's replace that with the new one we just created. We're going to move this one to the trash, and then from Finder, drag and drop your new scene file. We want to make sure copy files to destination is selected, and go ahead and click save. Back in our content view, now our scene name is something different. So instead of egg model, we want to call this egg fractured, or whatever you named it. Just make sure it matches. And I'm loading up the canvas to make sure that it loads correctly. And it did. We see the whole egg and the egg fractures here. Next thing is, now that we've scaled inside of Blender, we no longer need this code. So let's go ahead and delete this. The next thing we're going to worry about is how big the egg is again. What I'm going to do to remedy this is to add some padding, either above or below or around the egg, to make it look right. After adding in that padding, this is what I'm left with, and I'm pretty happy with that. It's not the cleanest code, but it doesn't need to be the cleanest code when we're just working out an MVP. Before jumping into the explode egg animation, let's have an animation that happens before the egg explodes. For example, in Pokemon Go, they do this thing where the egg shakes left and shakes right, and there's just like this shaking animation, and that's kind of what I want to mimic here, is that, little shaking before the egg actually explodes until it gets to the time where the egg needs to explode. So let's work on that first. The first thing we need to do is grab the egg node. And this code is going to look very familiar to you because we had it here before, except the name, instead of egg with the capital E, is now whole_egg, or whatever you named it. Then inside of this if-let statement is where we want to add the shaking animation. And we're going to add that shaking animation with this run action function. And this run action function takes an SCNAction. We're going to go ahead and create that. We're going to name it shake. Here is where we're going to add that let shake equals SCNAction. It's going to be an action that repeats forever. And we're going to pass in a shake sequence. Now let's create this shake sequence. The shake sequence here is going to take 2 more actions, but it's just a way that we can combine the shake left and the shake right actions. So we have to create the sequence. So SCNAction.sequence, and it's an array of SCNActions. And this is where we're going to put that shake left and the shake right. Let's create the shake left first. So let shake left, and that's going to be yet another SCNAction. And this is going to be a rotate. And it takes an X, a Y, a Z, and a duration. And we're going to rotate on the Y-axis. So we're going to rotate to the left by increasing Y by 0.05. And then everything else is going to remain 0. And the duration here can be whatever you want, but 0.5 worked well for me. I'm going to copy that and then call this shake right. And instead of 0.05, we're going to negate that, putting in a minus sign. And there we go. That should shake left and shake right. The next thing we need to do is to hide the fragments from the self-rapture. So this is what the code is going to look like. We're pulling the scene, we're getting the root node, we're enumerating all of the cell nodes, and then we're checking the prefix on those nodes. And the reason for that is there's a whole bunch of nodes all at the same hierarchy as the rest of the model. So there's like the whole egg, and then there's all the fragments. But all of the fragments have the prefix of whole_egg_cell. So because they all have that prefix, that's how we're going to find all of these nodes. And then once we get the node, we're just going to set isHidden to true. And that should hide it. Now let's take a look at the content view and load it up. Nice, great. So it's shaking back and forth. You can tinker around with these values if you want more shake, less shake, but this is good for me. Let's go back to the scene view, and we're going to add code so that after 1 second, we are going to explode our egg. We're going to work on that explode egg animation. The way that we're going to do that is with dispatch queue.main.async after, and then there's a deadline, so .now + 1, and then it takes completion, and so when that's complete, what do? Well, we're going to explode this egg. So let's go ahead and put this explode egg function somewhere down here. And what are we going to do when we explode the egg? Well, the first thing we're going to need to do is to hide the whole egg, which the code is going to look very familiar because we're just going to copy what we got up top to find it. Then we want to make all the nodes visible. And the way that we do that is to reverse the isHidden. So we're going to find the egg node first, the whole egg. And then, so I just copy that from above. I'm going to do isHidden, and now it's going to be true. The next thing we want to do is to add some gravity to the scene, right? So when the cells explode and go places, we need gravity. We need to set some properties on our physical world. So that's what that code is doing. It's just adding some gravity to the scene. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the nodes again because we're going to apply some properties to these nodes. I'm going to copy what we have up top where we find the nodes. Let's set isHidden to false now because we want to show all of these nodes. And then we are also going to apply some properties to these. Let's go over some of these properties. So the first thing I check is if it has a physics body. If it doesn't, then we're going to set a physics body on it and then apply some properties and some property values. For example, physics body, let's initialize it. Let's say it's affected by gravity. We added angular dampening, dampening and mass. That just has to do with the way that the node will interact once the node explodes. And then finally, we want to add some force, right? We want to add some kind of impact to make the cells move, basically. And that's what this code is doing. I set a force and then I create an impulse from that force. And then I'm going to use this value to actually set the action of the nodes flying everywhere. All right, so that's the apply force. So I apply the force with the impulse. Let's go to the content view and see what this looks like. All right, so it looks like I have a problem here, and it's because scene is optional. Let's try again. Oh, nice. Great. Yeah, so we have the egg explosion. This looks great. I think in the future, we're gonna want to like have a hidden object inside of the egg, so when it explodes, it actually shows a hidden object. But this looks really good for now, and this is everything I wanted to cover in this video, so I hope you stick around for next time. I hope you learned something today, and I will see you next time.